So just tell me when to advance to the next slide.
Yeah, well, you could stay here for a second. So we decided, like, we were thinking of why use synchronous or asynchronous learning. And I guess this little short presentation we're going to be doing is around not like how, but what purpose would it serve? What would it advance for each of our objectives or goals within our course? So I go first. So, and you can advance, yeah. So mine is really about, and I love this little slide, I've used it before, about emergency remote teaching. Because while I was really interested in, while I was really interested in e-learning and blended learning, when I joined the e-learning co-op, and I've taught for years and years for different universities online, I found that this one was much different. Because as you all know, to teach online, you usually go through training, and also students don't take 6 to 8 courses of online learning, and also not under the duress or stress of a global pandemic. So, you know, I imagined it as like teaching in a windstorm, and the kind of not feeling stable that I would feel. Okay, you can go, Ahmed. So when I thought about before, right, when we kind of went online, I sort of just transferred what I would do in class sort of to the online forum. And not as if I was the only class they had, but not really like looking at it globally. So I instituted discussion forums because I thought that would be a way to check in asynchronously, you know, with the work. I had homework to do, my drafting, I'm an English teacher, so the essays, you know, I had them do asynchronously, reading I had asynchronously, and then watching kind of lectures on YouTube or little things I had it asynchronously. This was the kind of asynchronous work I had assigned, and you could see by my thumbs up, thumbs down how successful it was. You could advance. And if you have any questions, just put that in the chat. So I found what really grounded me or helped me now, after I've taken different kinds of workshops about emergency remote teaching and, you know, going on these other things off campus, was I found identifying objectives really helped me ground. I also found that incorporating wellness into my classes. So one thing I would ask my students to do, and you know, you could do this now if you'd like, is in the chat box, I'd say, like, how is everyone feeling? If you had one word to describe how you were feeling, and you could enter it into the chat now. Just one word to describe how, you know, you're feeling about the upcoming semester, let's say. Okay, Louise is okay. Nervous, tired, excited, stressed, better, rushed, ready, good. Just waiting. So something I often would do to start my class, which I realized when I thought of why synchronous, would be to kind of show compassion or connect. So something I would say, if you would just humor me for a minute, is if everyone could just sort of sit up and feel their feet on the ground and put their hands on the top of their thighs and close their eyes. So just sort of like sit there for a second and relax your shoulders, feel your feet pressing into the floor and your hands on the tops of your thighs, and just close your eyes and just take 3 slow breaths. Just, you know, at your own pace, 3 deep breaths. Okay, so that's something and I don't know how that felt for you. If you want to write in the chat if that feels or makes kind of a difference, or how you feel after taking 3 deep breaths. I'd be curious to know. But so grounded, nice, relaxed for sure, calming, grounded, thanks. It's just a nice thing to do, you know, because they don't have any kind of warm up. So you could advance my slide, Ahmed. Oh yeah, so I read this, creativity is connecting the dots, curiosity is collecting them. And that was kind of a quote that inspired me to come up with my objectives for this semester. You can go, Ahmed. Connection, compassion, and curiosity. That's what I decided was gonna rule. So when I asked myself the why synchronous or asynchronous, I returned to my objectives for teaching. And something else that kind of affected me was this little video that I saw on Facebook. If you want to play it, it's about 46 seconds, Ahmed. So a little bit, you know, disheartening, but so I decided that I wanted to use my kind of class time. Yeah, really sad. You could write your, you know, and I think we feel it too, right? And I think winter is going to even be harder because they've been in here for a year and, you know, everyone's sort of tired, but it's a longer discussion. You can go to the next slide, Ahmed. So with that in mind, I've decided that my classes are going to be, you know, about kind of like making them feel better. And I will share that little video. Sorry, I can't see my something. Okay, yeah. So instead of like discussion forums, I thought I establish a book club that they can meet with each other, you know, and have some kind of like foster engagement, collaboration, connection. They could even meet with their book club group in breakout rooms in class, synchronous. Instead of reading responses, I would have assignments that encourage creativity, like collecting the dots. So somatic exercises where they have to walk around or talk back assignments, which if anyone wants to get in touch with me about any of these, I could go more in depth or assignments that lead to a sync activity, like to show and tell kind of thing. In terms of, you know, drafting, where it used to be more homework, I would make it more synchronous work during class time, small group meetups and peer review. And in terms of, you know, homework and readings, I shaved 35 to 40% off of my course. So, and someone in my department had a good idea, like plan for 12 weeks instead of 15, and less is more. And again, I'm in general education, so it might be a little easier for me to do that. But that's kind of an overview of what I did. I think that's it. Ahmed? Yeah, and this is just a little feedback I got from my, you know, I got a lot of these little cards. We had a class Instagram page, and, you know, thank you for making this class interesting, stress-free, and pleasant for us, you know, that kind of thing. And and they appreciated the 5-minute stress. So that's all. I was surprised with the nice feedback I got. Okay.
So thanks, Andrea. So I'm also from Gen Ed, and I do think that one of the advantages of teaching in Gen Ed is that we might be able to give a bit more breathing room, like Andrea suggests, than in some of the core courses. So I really appreciate what I'm learning from Andrea on this and the importance of wellness, right? Because we've all learned a lot from each other, the e-learning fellows, and from Chantal. And so that's something that Andrea's been really good about bringing to us. So I went into e-learning for the main reason I was interested in it was because of its flexibility, both for me as a teacher, as a mother of young children, pre-pandemic, okay, and also the flexibility for the students, right? Being able to adjust it a little bit more to I don't know, their learning schedule, their learning styles, maybe be able to individualize it a little more. And then the pandemic hit, and you know, we were told, well, in our department, at least 25% synchronous minimum. And I went with that, and I really needed the flexibility because with 2 young children at home and no daycare for several months, that was key. And so I in the sort of real first experience we all had of online teaching, I went with maybe 1 synchronous class every 4 classes, right? So 1 out of 4. And I found that it worked very well for flexibility. I did asynchronous lectures that I recorded, and the students really appreciated being able to watch things on their own time. So in terms of flexibility, that worked very well for both me and the students in winter 2020. But I didn't feel very connected to my students. I don't think they felt very connected to me. And so when I thought about fall 2020, I wanted the flexibility still, but I also wanted more connection, and tied to that, my goal was to sort of enhance student engagement, and all within the context of having a reasonable workload, both for me and the students, right? So I'm going to tell you how that went, what I did and how it went, right? And what I hope to do a little better this semester. So in terms of synchronous activities in the fall, I kept maybe 25 to 50%. I didn't do full synchronous because I need the flexibility, and I thought they needed it. But I found that I had to meet more frequently than, say, once out of every 4 classes. And so I made sure that I interacted live in some way with each student at least once a week, right? So it might have been as a whole group on Zoom, it might have been with small groups. A lot of the time it was with small groups. And sort of that's the main thing I've been experimenting with since I've been doing the e-learning, is working with small groups of about 10 students at a time online for shorter student-centered discussion periods related to, of course, the course content, but teaching based on their questions, right? So it's more student-centered. And it really, I've found it I've learned a lot from it, right? And I hope to use some of that stuff when we go back to teaching in person as well. And I found that meeting more frequently in smaller groups for shorter amounts of time was more effective than doing, one big class with the students every once in a while, right? So that's sort of what I did. And with the asynchronous activities, I went, I would say I went whole hog in the fall. I had video lectures. I wanted to do them interactive, so they had questions to answer as they watched them. I used a program called H5P that some of you might be familiar with. I had lots of formative assignments, lots of quizzes for them to do after having watched video lectures or done readings. And on top of that, discussion forums for them to ask questions asynchronously. And so, yeah, that was a lot of work for me. So maybe I'll ask Ahmad to go to the next slide so we can look at how I achieved and did not achieve my original goals, right? So in terms of connection, I really think that the small group synchronous teaching was successful, and it made me feel more connected. I got a lot of student feedback. I asked for feedback at the end of the semester and about halfway through, and most of the students that responded really appreciated meeting in small groups. They were always meeting in the same groups, right? And they felt that it kept them more connected to me and to other students. So on that level, I think it was successful. In terms of student engagement, some classes, there was more engagement than others. I think, as you all know, certain things work with some groups and not with others. And so I'm still working on tweaking that. In terms of flexibility, the students commented that they really appreciated not being always synchronous with me and having the time to do their assignments and to meet with me only sort of a little bit of the time a week. So in terms of flexibility, I think the students were satisfied. But for me, it wasn't as good as in the winter, because when you do small group work, the students only have to meet with you, maybe 25% of the time, but you end up being there most of the time synchronously, right? So it's a lot of time synchronous for the teacher. And that ties into my last point, which is where I really failed in terms of myself as a teacher. The students commented that the workload was reasonable for them, most students, but I just found it way too much. And I ditched a bunch of things halfway through the semester. I stopped doing interactive lectures, and it was just enough to do lectures, video lectures. There's various reasons for that, and if you're interested, I can tell you about that later in the question period. But the discussion forum, I never had time to actually moderate it well. And discussion forums are great if you have the time to work with them, but they take a lot of time, right? So I stopped using the discussion forum halfway through the semester as well. And so that would bring me to my last slide, right? So basically I'm sharing the goals that I had, the successes and failures that I had in fall 2020, and sort of what I plan to do to maintain the advantages that I think I might have brought to the fore in my classes in the fall, but lighten the workload because it's really too much. You know, I have a picture here of Atlas holding up the world. Okay, it wasn't quite that much, but it felt heavy at times. And so I really want to keep the small group synchronous activities. And I think making them student-centered does take some of the workload off of me, the teacher. I don't have to like prepare a lecture for each group. But what I've done is I'm going to try to work with bigger groups, so smaller than the whole group, but bigger than groups of 10, so I don't have to meet so often. And I'm going to work a little bit more with small group and whole group teaching so that it gives me a little bit more time. But the main thing that I'm changing has to do with the asynchronous sort of structure of the course, which is what allows you to do things like successful synchronous activities, right? It's your asynchronous setup, at least in the way I've set up my courses. So I'm just going to repeat something that Andrea said before. Sometimes less is more, right? Especially in the context of a pandemic, doing too many asynchronous activities really didn't work for me. And I also think that building a good asynchronous structure to an online course is something that happens over time, right? And we've all been thrown into this. We're often doing it for several classes at the same time. And it's hard to do it very well quickly, right? So I think I've tried to sort of give myself a break, and I suggest giving yourself a break. And if you want to, during the pandemic, but also in the future, use asynchronous activities, well, maybe think about it in the long term, right? So what do I want to do in the long term? What can I do for this term, right? Be realistic about, well, what can I achieve for this term, right? And I want to just give an example of what I mean by that. So I had the goal of having these wonderful interactive video lectures. I wanted to, my face to be seen in them sometimes, so it was more connecting. I wanted to have all sorts of questions inserted and for it all to be very effective and also perfect, right? I wanted it all to be perfect. Of course, it wasn't. And what I've set myself as a goal for this semester, instead, I'm going to continue to use video lectures, but I'm not going to make them interactive this semester, right? So the interactive part is going to happen in the synchronous meetings, but if I can get, a bunch of good short video lectures for this class done this semester, then next semester, if we still happen to be online, or even if we don't, I'll have this set of video lectures made, and then I can work on making them interactive, right? I can work on adding things in so that there's more sort of back and forth with the students, but I'm not going to try and do it all at once this semester because of the pandemic and because it really is a lot of work to set up a good asynchronous structure, right? So those are sort of my, that's my experience and my, what I want to share with you about my experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to speak to you about my experience. I teach in a very different setting. It's a technical program. It's the physiotherapy technology program. And so as you can see by the ponderation there at the bottom, there's 3 hours of lab for every 1 hour of theory. So it's a very practical course. And when we decided as a department that we would try to move a very practical course such as this online, the challenge, of course, is to determine, well, how much do we do synchronously? How much do we do asynchronously, just like everybody else did in their courses? But in this course, like I said, it's very practical. So I put the two major things that we do there. One is we try to teach students how to test strength in very weak patient populations. And then we try to teach them different exercises that they could prescribe to reverse these deficits, these strength deficits. So how do you do that online exactly? And how do you do it in an engaging way, in a way that allows them to achieve the learning outcomes? So what I had decided to do was that I would take the theory and try a combo of synchronous and asynchronous learning methods. But the labs I really felt needed to be done synchronously because, again, it's performance-based. They're they're learning how to test strength and they're learning how to give exercises. So how exactly would I do that asynchronously? I didn't think it would be achievable. So I moved to do that synchronously. So in the next slide, I can give you a little more detail as to how we did that. So for the theory, the asynchronous part, I used a combination of recorded videos, and as Sarah did, I embedded H5P technology in there. So I used quizzes in there, a lot of quizzes that gave students immediate feedback as to whether or not they were understanding the concepts. And I also introduced branching scenarios where, again, they were given a certain scenario and they had to choose what they thought was the next best step. And if the step was correct, they received positive feedback. If the step was incorrect, they received feedback that their choice was not the best choice, and a rationale was given as to why perhaps their choice was not the ideal one, and they were returned back and asked to try again. So that's basically what we did in the asynchronous classes. And when there was a recorded video, even though they did get quizzes in there and feedback, when we would meet synchronously, we would discuss what they saw in the video. So I would, instead of me lecturing, I would just say, okay, what did you guys think about this? And what did you think about that concept? And then I would offer, again, new little quizzes in the synchronous component, just to, again, reinforce their understanding. In the lab, however, it was mainly synchronous. I wouldn't say it was 100%. There were some collaborative Google Docs, some work that they had to do in anticipation to the synchronous labs. But what we did is we did simulation. So what you see there is myself and our lab technician, and the students were each assigned something to do, so an exercise to give or a muscle to test, and they had to tell me what to do, and they had to tell the patient, like how to position the patient, how to hold them, how to move them, and they would provide the instructions. So these are, this is basically how the lab took out. And so the feedback that I got for the course is in the next slide. And so at the end of the course, as part of my e-learning portfolio, I thought it would be important to get some feedback from students. So I developed a little feedback questionnaire. And other than just Likert questions, I also left some room for open-ended questions. And one section was, what did you like best about the course? And the other one obviously was, what did you think was least effective in the course that you would like to see improved? And so basically, here's some comments that they said, and the 3 comments I chose are basically representative of the overall comments. But so I was able to go over the videos several times if there was something unclear. So they really, really liked the videos. The asynchronous aspects really helped too, because there was all of that information condensed in much less time, whereas the 3-hour synchronous labs had 50% fluff. And so when I think, well, what fluff was there? Because it was pretty content driven. I didn't see any fluff in there other than a few dad jokes left and right to try to keep their interest. But what I got out of that was students had to present what did they want me to do with our lab technician. And so what was happening there was that if the student wasn't presenting, they were losing interest. So they were there and engaged and participating when it was their turn, but if it wasn't their turn, they weren't necessarily that interested. And so the other comment that we can partially see there is that one student wrote, we have 5 hours of classes online before yours, and then we have 3 hours with you online. We can't stay concentrated for that amount of time. It's impossible. And so obviously, they enjoyed individual instruction and individual feedback that was occurring in the asynchronous part. So what did I learn from all this? Well, first, in a very, very practical course like this, there is obviously a need for synchronous activities. It's impossible to do the full course asynchronously. And it's also difficult to do a course like this fully online. There would have to be some face-to-face instruction there. But in the online environment, it's a very, very clear message to me that asynchronous is enjoyed by students. They feel that it's more effective. And it just reminds me that what the power behind asynchronous learning is really these learning objectives. So these videos that Sarah and I have talked about, things such as the branching scenarios, the recordings, they really like the fact that it was recorded, and if they miss something or weren't able to pay attention, they can go back to it and learn it at their own pace. So one other major benefit to the learning objects that I realized was that when I was recording these videos, I took what I normally talk about in 2 hours in a lecture, and I removed all of that unnecessary information, and I was able to make a 15, 20-minute video out of it. So it was much more succinct and to the point, and it really focused on the knowledge and concepts students needed to know. The other thing is that it provided immediate personalized feedback. So instead of me asking the question to the full class, the class at large, and having the same person respond all the time, and me realizing, oh, well, that person understands. Well, if I have 40 students in the class, each of those 40 individuals is getting an assessment and getting feedback about their own individual understanding. So that to me is where asynchronous learning has its merit and its advantages. And as Sarah had said just prior to me speaking, in order to craft a effective learning object, it really takes a lot of planning and perfecting. So my recommendation would be try something, get something down, get a video started, get a branching scenario started. And what will happen is, you know, as you offer this course over and over again, or as you progress through the course, you're able to perfect this, and it just gets better and better over time. So my videos have improved over time. They're not perfect. They will continue to improve. The branching scenarios have become more sophisticated. So I would really, really encourage you to, if you haven't yet, give it a try. None of us like to see we don't like to see ourselves on video. I'm getting more and more comfortable with it as I review. My voice doesn't sound as perhaps as bad as I originally thought it was, while I do every time I hear myself, but I'm getting more and more comfortable with myself. So give it a try, and you have nowhere to go other than to improve. And I think the students really, really do appreciate that. So that's it, I think, for me. I'll hand it over to Ahmad.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. All right, I want to first one more time give it a try at the closed captions. Do you guys see the closed captions on the top of the Zoom window appearing? All right, so this is a new thing that I learned. When you project Google Slides specifically, there's an option for closed captions. And this only works if you do it on Zoom, it works, but only for the person who is presenting. So now I'm the presenter. That's why it works. But for the colleagues, it didn't work because I was advancing the slide. So this can be a useful thing because I'm a big time UDLer, evangelist UDLer. I wanted to share this with you in terms of accessibility. And you can also, if you want, you can even have like a blank. You can have a blank PowerPoint, and you can just type your notes on it if you want. So you don't have to prepare necessarily beforehand. So you can use the annotate option if you want to do that. All right. So let's try to wrap this up. Let me see if I can get rid of this. All right, so should we use synchronous or asynchronous? And if I want to wrap up, I think it really depends. It really depends on your design. So as Sarah and Mark pointed out, if you have a good asynchronous material, that can go a far way, but that would take a lot of preparation. Okay, so my own solution is to use synchronous for what needs to be done live. In other words, you use asynchronous by default, okay? Assuming that you can put in the time and prepare that and design it beforehand, okay? And then instead use that time to meet students one-on-one. So this was probably the greatest highlight of my experience. When I gave videos for students to watch, I used that time, the class time where they were not coming, I used that time to meet students one-on-one, okay? And the advantage of that is that, so basically I had a conversation with them, and in the conversation, first of all, we built a bond. So remember that there is this disconnect, so we kind of get over that. I get to know them as a person. I get to verify their progress. So not necessarily an oral test, but just to see if they're following or not. And then to maintain academic integrity also, because when you speak to the person, you can easily tell their level of competency. And then the answers they give you online, you can tell whether that measures up to what you have seen from the person or not. All right. So that's kind of like the kind of summary. I also have a video for my e-learning profile, which I'm going to share with you in the chat box. All right. So we're going to stop here. We're going to give time for questions. And also, as an activity, we would like to ask you to reflect on these two questions. So first of all, what is one of your main teaching goals for winter 2021? And what is one adjustment that you could make to the balance of synchronous and asynchronous activities in your course to help you better achieve this goal? So if you want, I would suggest that maybe take a minute to think about your goal and the adjustment that you would make, and then share that with us. You can share that either in the chat box, or more better is to use the mic. And we're also open to questions.
Francis, would you want to share? He had a great idea. I don't know if you'd be willing to share it now. In terms of student connection, you're on mute.
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. Actually, yeah. Well, what I could say in response to something I'm going to change this semester is I'm going to bring asynchronous work time into synchronous time. As in, if I was normally see students say 4 hours a week, I was only seeing them for maybe an hour and a half a week. And then the rest of the time they're doing asynchronous work. But I'm going to have them just have structured work time during synchronous time a lot more, which is, echoing a lot of what people are saying, so that they're actually help them manage their time asynchronously, I guess. But yeah, one thing that I did that was really successful, that I was pleased with last semester, is I had for each of my courses learning pods, which was putting students in groups of 4, and they had their own individual private chat thread. And I imagine you can do that on any number of different platforms. I use Microsoft Teams, so it was just available for them and for me. And every Friday, they had what I called a finisher. So Friday afternoon, they had to post in their group chat thread some sort of prompt that I gave them that I expected like 10 or 15 minutes of thought. And it would kind of gave them an established routine. So every Friday they were communicating with the same regular students. And at least it took a nugget of their day to give thought to their English course before the weekend hit and whatever madness came their way. And it served, like, if you want an idea of kind of like what kind of prompts I gave, they served various functions. Sometimes it was review. So just maybe identify 2 key takeaways from this week, or identify something you want clarified and then respond to somebody else's, clarify for them what was going on. I see Jim has a hand up. Is that for?
Yeah. I have a question for you, Francis, if you don't mind. Yeah, just so you mentioned earlier, use the synchronous time to have like, what do you mean by that? Like exactly, is it a good policy to have during the class time, have them just do the individual assignments? You think that would be a good policy instead of speaking?
I think so. Coming from the advice of people with more expertise than me, and from my own trial and error anecdotal stuff, I plan on doing more of that this semester for sure.
So you would have the class going on and tell them you have to attend, and you'd have assignments at the time. Like I'm not sure that's the part.
I'm gonna do a little more of that this or even just jumpstart the homework. Come to class. I expect you to be here. It may only not for an hour and a half or 2 hours,
okay,
but 45 minutes, and start drafting something or get into a small.
Do you think they would attend class, or they would just say, "Oh, just do it on our own time"?
I'll tell them to attend, and then I'll make it required. And then if they want to touch base with me and say, "Hey, look, I've got a great start and this is going on," I think that's the individual connection judgment call on my part. But whereas last semester, I would say just come to one of our periods. Take your choice, one of the two, and you only need to attend one. And then, you know, I was expecting them to do asynchronous work on their own beyond that.
Okay.
But it was hard to manage. It was hard to keep up with all the questions coming asynchronously and stuff like that. I think this year I'm going to say
Another quick question for when it comes to asynchronous work that you give them, do you correct each one of those, or do you just have them discuss it with you?
it depends. Some, I mean, I didn't correct like what I'm talking about now, this learning pod thing. I didn't correct that. That was, yeah. And then I do more shorter stuff that's kind of pass fail. I expect you to think about this informal writing for 20 minutes and show me that you've thought for 20 minutes and it's good. So sort of quick, like coming from, again, more people with more expertise with me when small assignments and grading strategies and stuff like that. So yeah, some different layers of in-depth grading on my part based on assignment design.
Yeah.
All
right, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Yes, Louise?
Yep, Francis, I was just wondering about the chat thread. Is that sort of like you would have it in Gmail with like chat running along the side, or is it a group page that students all contribute to?
It's this, I set up groups. It's a chat thread, like as if it were a WhatsApp group or a text group.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I would have an assigned like this week's finisher in the normal assignment, and it's like post in your learning pod. You know, sometimes it was just to jumpstart. Sometimes it was to engage with content. You know, between these two characters. I'm an English teacher, I think.
Yeah.
But like for other people, you know, this reading, which of the two characters do you sympathize most? A few sentences, why? You know, sometimes it's to jumpstart homework. You know, you have an assignment coming up to write about one of the 3 poems we looked at. Which one are you going to work with, and why is that striking to you now? Sometimes it was just very personal check-ins, you know, like how's the semester going? What's going the way you anticipated? What's surprising you for better or for worse? Or share something totally non-school related that's important for you to do this weekend. And what is it, you know, and make it happen, you know, and then maybe the following week, did it happen, or why is it important to you? And sometimes it was a blend of both, like for studying imagery or characterization, comment on someone else's profile pic, and what does that sort of, what are the connotations that go along with that if you sort of analyze it as imagery. So it was that, but then the other function was to offload work from myself. So I was always encouraging students to, if you have a question or clarification, turn to your learning pod before me, because out of those 3 or 4 people, probably you're going to get a response faster than you're going to get one from me. So a lot of just like the practical remote learning stuff about the platform, or, you know, where do I find this file again? Or, you know, what did he say about these instructions? Or I missed class. Can you guys fill me in a little bit about this? Da, 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 da. So really sort of like, I don't know, take care of, help each other before you ask me to help you, kind of thing.
That sounds like a great way to kind of cut back on the pages and pages and pages of Mios.
Yeah, and then you know, and then if they really needed more clarification, in like they could mention me in the platform that I use, and then I get a notification that says, you know, okay, boom, and I can jump right into their chat thread and see what's going on. So I wasn't reading these, you know, I mean, I've got 120 students. I wasn't going every Friday and reading through my 3 sections of all of this stuff, but I'd dip in from time to time just to see or remind them to stay on top of it. And as you can all probably imagine, some people that really clicked, depending on personalities and what's going on. Some people didn't give a shit and just sort of like, you know, backed off. But if it's a group of 4 or 5, inevitably, you know, at least 2 people made a connection. Sometimes all 4 did. So that was definitely asynchronous, community building, taking responsibility, helping each other out, review / personal check-ins, kind of all bound up in.
Thank you very much for those interesting comments. Do we have someone else who would like to ask questions to fellows about the asynchronous, synchronous aspect, the balance, or an examples of how they did it last year?
I'd be also curious if anyone else had great successful ideas like learning pods or things that, you know, they took away.
I have a general question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So just a general question on asynchronous. Would this be considered an asynchronous activity if you give the students a take-home assignment, let's say, and then to have it ready for next class? Would that be considered like a good asynchronous work?
I would say potentially yes, but let's see what Andrea has to say.
I'm just curious because, you know, is that homework? Like, are you gonna, like, I think Francis, like, so
that's actually what I'm going at. What's the difference between homework and asynchronous?
Well, this is it, right? And that's why sometimes to help them. So are you holding both days synchronously? Like, how much synchronous are you doing?
Up until now, everything's been synchronous because I'm sort of new to this and I haven't really prepared videos or anything. So far, up to now, every day, every class, I have a lecture online and they listen and like it would be live. That's what I'm doing. But I'm trying to think more out of the box now. I'm trying to think, you know, what else I can do to introduce more asynchronous stuff.
Okay, so here's the thing. So what I would say, Jim, is that the idea of asynchronous is replacing the part where the students are with you. So if you look at the ponderations, the last item is the homework. We already have that. That part isn't touched so much by the pandemic. So the conversation here revolves around the two first elements, which is the class time and the lab time. So if you want to think about the synchronous versus asynchronous, you have to think about the things that you used to do with them physically in class. To what extent are you still doing them live, and to what extent are you giving something to do on their own, right? Otherwise, the homework itself, I think it's kind of like not applicable. So this discussion is not really applicable to a homework because either way, you did have homeworks anyway, unless the homework covers something that you would have covered in class. Sarah, you want to go?
And that's why I'm asking though. You just said like you got to think of what you do in class and giving to them to do it online on their own. Isn't that sort of homework?
I was going to sort of, Kathy's just put in the chat, the line is fuzzy. And I do think it is kind of fuzzy because sometimes things that we would do in class, we give them as homework now, right? But one of the ways I try to distinguish what's asynchronous from what's homework is I try to bring either it's some kind of lecture element to the asynchronous because I do lecturing in class, or I try to bring some kind of interactive element. So for instance, this coming semester, starting next week, I'm going to be using a kind of interactive reading platform called Perusal, and the reading part of it, just reading the text is homework, right? But they have to comment on it on this platform, and they have to read other students' comments and you know, have a discussion with each other. And so I see that kind of like asynchronous work because you'd be doing that discussion in the classroom usually, but they're going to do it on an asynchronous platform. And then we'll bring it into the classroom later, right? But it's still kind of a blurry distinct. I still think it's blurry because we're asking them to do a lot more on their own, right?
Yeah.
But that's how I sort of divide it up. I try to bring, it's either lecturing or it's interactive.
So one thing that I would like to add here is that one of the ideas here is to think about the way we deliver and the advantages of synchronous versus asynchronous. So one point is that if you think in terms of accessibility and UDL, Asynchronous has certain advantages where the students can go with their own pace, especially if you provide them something that's accessible, let's say in text format, or which can be used in multiple formats. So when we think about the synchronous, asynchronous balance, these are the things that we have to think about. So to what extent is each of them accessible? So that's an important question to keep in mind in determining what should be offered. Another point is the idea of engagement and activity. So a traditional lecture is not really active. When we go to, so I really like what Kathy wrote in the comment, that students comment that it's like a stream of ongoing assignment. That to me is not such a bad idea, because it indicates that you are actually engaging the students. Because regularly they come to the class and just sit and listen. Now they have to be engaged, and that's why it feels like an assignment, because they have to input things into the computer, for instance, into the activities that they're doing. So they're becoming more active in the part that they were not as active before, right? So it could feel like homework, it could feel like assignment, but I guess that's an indication of being more actively engaged in their own learning process. So that's another thing. I think this is one of the advantages of Corona, which makes us actually rethink and redesign our approaches to teaching.
I have to leave, but I just wanted to say before I head out, for me, finding the blend was partly in trying to create, because I found that with the asynchronous, sometimes I would take something that I would do in the classroom and try to just put it straight online. And so it ended up being, maybe I would have done in class, I would have done 3 or 4 activities around a central theme. And depending how I presented that, it seemed bigger or smaller for the students. I think that if you can create your asynchronous materials in such a way that it feels like a learning experience, that they click on, that it's all linked to one document or one central location, that they can access the various parts of an activity from, that it makes it easier and feel less intimidating for the students than to do 4 different things. That feels like, for us, it's one part of one learning experience, but for them it may feel very disjointed and like it's 4 different assignments. And the other thing I tried to do is timestamps, and I think that can really help with the overloading of for the asynchronous work. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Timestamps, if people don't know, was Daniel Goldsmith. One of his things he would do is he would give, like, on his asynchronous classes, say like read me first, and have a sort of an idea like, this will take you 5 minutes, this should not take you more than 10 minutes. So at the end you could see how much work, if you at the end of it go, wow, this is going to be 2 hours for them, then probably not a good idea. But
yeah, and if you use course flow over there, you can also communicate the minutes that it takes it's good for students to know how much they're expected to put in beforehand. But again, these are rough estimates, these are averages, so it can also be a little bit disheartening to some of them if it takes them longer. Francis, go ahead.
When you say, you mean course flow on the Saltese? The Saltese?
Yeah, exactly.
we always have to estimate for longer for any online work, right? Everything online takes a half hour to 2 hours longer, I think.
Yeah.
And the time goes so fast, right? It's already 7 minutes till the end of this. So.
So can I ask if any of you, just as a result of the workshop or your prior reflection before today, as you're planning your courses, whether you're making any big changes to your kind of synchronous asynchronous balance, or thinking of making any that you think will make things better this semester, and if so, what kind of changes you're thinking of making?
That's yeah, if you don't mind, I'll answer that. That's what I'm trying to do, because it was well last semester, but I'm just trying to figure out more of what more asynchronous activities I can do, as opposed to giving them homework. So I'm just trying to think now, telling them during class time, I would like you to read this or do this activity on your own, and I'm here to answer questions, something like that. I'm trying to bring more asynchronous work into it. because I find online it's like that people are feeling secluded, feeling isolated, and you need that synchronous time. But at the same time, also they like the flexibility. I find the students do like flexibility on working on their own. So you gotta find the right balance, and I'm trying to figure that out now.
Those were two of my main concerns: flexibility and connection.
Yeah.
So I see. I'm with you on that one. Anyone else sort of have some ideas to share with us? Lots of people are saying small group activities in the chat.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the small group stuff, but I am concerned about, replicating your experience of spending all my time, because it's delightful in the moment. Like, that's the thing about meeting with students. It's delightful in the moment, and cumulatively it's exhausting. So, so I just, I need to get it, like I need a giant Post-it note on my screen that says, like, stop it. When you were talking about your videos and saying that they had to be all these things and also perfect, So I feel like I am going to have to make peace with dropping some of that connection, do what I can, but not deliver as much as I would ordinarily, because I don't feel like I have it in the tank, to give. So but I just have to be strict with myself, to sort of discipline my own expectations, So.
Just a point to emphasize maybe based on that is we have to remember that even when we give asynchronous activities, there still needs to be a sense of community for the students. So if students are doing an asynchronous activity, it would probably be very appreciated by the students if you make yourself available through a chat or some online platform that they could still reach out to you during that time. And I think that in itself makes a big difference to students. So when they don't like asynchronous activity is when you tell them, here's the work, do it, and kind of good luck, versus here's the work and do it. But I've also opened up this chat room that we can, through the week, if you have difficulty or whatever, put your information there. I will take a look at the chat room. Other students could also answer your questions. And so there's ongoing participation and feedback. So perhaps there, Louise, that can, your comment of letting go type of thing, maybe this could appease a little bit and make you a little more comfortable with giving them more of an asynchronous.
It might. I mean, I think, I'm not sure, like, I'm really not sure, but
I was just going to say, in relation to what Mark is saying, is that my experience, I was setting up discussion forums in order to have that, but I found it was much more work to properly sort of engage in a discussion forum than to actually meet with them synchronously in these smaller groups and address the questions there. Yeah. And so asynchronous for when they do the work, but I found the synchronous feedback generally was more efficient for me, even though it means you're on synchronous most of the time as a teacher, even though the students aren't. But it's still a little more efficient for me and for my subject, right? I think it depends on the subject as well.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this meeting was initially designed for 90 minutes, so we are going to stay, but it was advertised for 60 minutes. So if anybody here, we just have an open floor. So if anybody has to leave here, feel free to leave. If you feel like discussing more, we're going to be at your service. I think Inat, did you have something to add, Inat? I don't know.
I was just thinking with a synchronous, asynchronous question of what to do. I don't know how many of you are on the Teams community, on the Teams team. Yeah. So somebody, I think it was Claudio who posted an article for somebody, and I can't remember the name of the author, but he recounted that he asked one of his students how she knew if she was going to watch the lecture like she was going to attend synchronously, or if she was going to watch it asynchronously, because apparently it's a hybrid model. So they had an option to do both. And I think the response was, if she can fold laundry while attending the lecture, then she would watch it asynchronously. So in a way, it's an interesting perspective. If there is nothing to do but listen, then maybe it can be an asynchronous lecture. If the student really needs to participate, if there's something going on, then it could be a synchronous activity. And I was wondering what you guys thought about that. If you had any examples or counter examples. Oh, hi. We have a little
bye everybody
joining us.
And could you just clarify, is it just trying to define what's synchronous and what's asynchronous, or is that a rule of thumb for what should I do synchronous and what should I do asynchronous?
I think he was asking a student how she knew whether to attend to watch a recording of the lecture or to attend the lecture synchronously, and the student's rule of thumb was whether or not she could fold laundry while attending. So
I think that's a wonderful example. I wouldn't use it as a yardstick for distinguishing between synchronous or asynchronous. You can, by the way, it's useful to come up with other similar things. It's kind of like when you're driving and you can be listening to, let's say, a podcast or something. Or for me, it's almost like marking. Sometimes when I'm marking, I can have something going in the background and still get the gist of it. But yeah, it's basically the level of engagement involved in the activity. So either way, I mean, you could have a live lecture and you're folding laundry, or you could even have a video that you're watching and you're still folding laundry. So both way would work. But in terms of being involved in the learning process, then that's when you can't be folding laundry anymore.
Which I think sort of indicates that it's more important to be synchronously present when you can't be folding laundry. I mean, though you could do asynchronously both, maybe.
I would say that asynchronous, more involved work is also important, because it's allowing students to do more in-depth thinking on their own time, and not when they have to be folding laundry or when they have to be serving supper to their kids or well, sorry, I'm thinking in my world, some of our students have kids too. So I think that maybe in terms of a lecture, that distinction could make sense. But I think a lot of asynchronous work requires more involvement than that, which is why it could be good to have it asynchronous, so that people are actually there for it, right? Their mind is there for it. Just my thoughts. I have this total silence afterwards. So
we also have a couple other participants who I would love to actually hear. I don't know, James, would you like to share your thoughts, or Hannah?
Actually, I would, if you, I would actually like to get your opinion on what I've been doing, which I think incorporates some of what you've been doing in a slightly different way. I did about 50% asynchronous and 50 synchronous, and I gave the students lecture notes, so readings every week. And within the readings, they had little boxes pointing out what to focus on and telling them when to watch my videos. So the topics that needed more explanation, I gave them the videos. And then every week I had them do a question set, which was just some basic questions. And the last question was always, what questions do you have? And then during my lectures, I would address any questions they had, any concepts they had difficulty with. And it seemed to help them keep up. And I always corrected their question sets. They were basic questions that I could correct quickly. But then in my synchronous classes, a lot of the time was taken up clarifying material or going through the question set. So I've sort of lost the case studies, the group work that I did during the synchronous component. So I guess I'm wondering what you think of that as sort of a basic model, the readings and the videos as asynchronous plus the question set, so that they, so that I know that they've done it, and then during class going through the material.
I would say this is really what I do also. So I would give them the content beforehand and use the class time for the practice. And because you teach a technical program, I think Mark might be a better person to share his thoughts.
Yeah, I'm at biomedical laboratory technology. So I also had the students in person for labs, which was very nice for me. So we had that connection.
Yeah, I've done similar to you, and the feedback from students is they like that best.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're helping them to apply the information as opposed to just giving them the information, and we all know that that's where they need help, right? So I would say if you continue along that track, it sounds like you're on the right route there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the one problem I had is the synchronous classes seem to be taken up. The negative comments I had is that I was just going through the questions. I wasn't giving them anything new in the synchronous classes. And they have a point because I wanted to answer what their questions were, but then the students who didn't have questions were bored. So with the synchronous time, do you put students in groups and have them do case studies or give them new material and just assume that they'll figure out what they didn't understand?
Yeah, so what I've done is just to bring everyone to a common starting point is I normally ask them questions over key elements that were in the video or prep work. And then I'll split them up into groups. Once we all have a common understanding of the information, I'll split them up into groups and give them case studies there. And then I'll circulate and go answer the individual groups. And then we, at the end, take 10 or 15 minutes, come together as a group again, and go over the key elements of the case to make sure everybody's on board and we all have a similar base of information.
Okay. And how long does that take you? How long are your synchronous?
That's a good question. Well, if we get to like the asynchronous part, I will give them the amount of, it's usually, I usually call that homework. Like it's usually their homework part. And then I'll use up the full class time if we're going to meet together synchronously.
Okay, because that I shortened my synchronous component, so it's now only about 45 minutes, and I can't get through anything. I get them into the groups, and I don't even have time to visit each group, and my class is over. So. Oh,
okay. Yeah. You got. I find you got to set boundaries for them. So you tell them you have 15 minutes to do this, and you got to get them going. I mean, at the beginning, you got to be a little flexible, but as I feel as they get more and more experience as the semester goes on, they get better at realizing what the expectations are and the amount of work.
That's a good point. I'll try it again. Like Sarah was saying, I have a small child who was at home without daycare for a while, and I found it overwhelming for me to organize. So hopefully it will get better as I get more experience. And
yeah, it's a work in progress, right? Yeah.
James, you had something?
Not really, Ahmed. Thanks a lot for this. It's kind of interesting. I teach economics along with Ahmed, so I just listening to these various disciplines, the problems we're facing, and I'm really no different. It's a work in progress. One little point I maybe point out is two thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but just two things. In my own experience is that I found working on the screen, what we call synchronous. In the classroom, it's possible to do it for an hour and 15 minutes and have their attention. Online, that's just more difficult. It's I found, just somebody just mentioned 45 minutes is about the maximum for me. So I try to, whatever it is synchronous, I'll have a discussion and so on. And then after about 45 minutes, I say, fine, you've got extra work to do. Try to do something else somewhere. I'll stay around to answer questions for students, but I just found that's one factor. The other thing too, I found is that I like to meet the students twice a week. And I think it's partly their age. The asynchronous stuff, it probably would work better for older people, but I was a bit concerned. I saw an article in the Journal de Montréal just recently about the attrition rate at other stages. I don't know what the experience of Dawson is, but it's something I don't know how to deal with that exactly. I'm intrigued by this idea that I know Ahmad does this with having small, like you've been discussing, having small groups where each student has the impression that they're talking to you. Because what I found in my classes this past semester, I did basically met them twice a week, but for about 45 minutes each time, is that some of the students were very talkative in the class. They'd turn on their microphone or chat or whatever. But several of the students just really, I could see that they were there, but I don't know if they were engaged or not. And so I like this idea of maybe having smaller groups, maybe once every 2 weeks, or meeting students, just small groups of 5 or 6 people individually, so that they have an impression that they're actually dealing with somebody that's real, that's actually here, particularly for this age group. I don't know, the idea of putting them into groups and so on, I've thought about that so that they work together. I noticed that the students sometimes help each other. I was teaching a statistical quantitative methods class that required Excel. And I know several times the students were helping each other to overcome certain issues. So this is another way to engage them. But I didn't have a major problem with attrition, although I have to say I think it was a bit higher than would have been in like previous sessions when I'm teaching in the college. So anyway, these are my various thoughts on it. It's interesting how, as I think as Ahmad, you said, it's that because of this pandemic, we've been kind of forced to rethink how we do our teaching. And in effect, we have to do this asynchronous system, which may be a very positive, one positive thing that will come out of all this, because I think it's a very useful tool. Anyway, these are some of my random thoughts on this, but very interesting to listen to you guys talk about this, particularly the different disciplines and the problems you're confronting with it.
Thanks a lot, James. What I would suggest, I think the idea of meeting them twice for a shorter time is a very good idea. And you can easily turn the second half of the class into your individual meetings without losing anything. So it could be like a drop-in session, and you can also have some students that you meet. So you can assign, you have used the Moodle scheduler, so you can have them.
Yeah, I thought of doing that. The Moodle scheduler works well. A little point about this, kind of intriguing. I got into doing this I wouldn't say online, but so much using computers for teaching through a professor. He did this at the end of the 1990s. He started doing it. And what he did, a bit like just mentioned a moment ago, is that in effect, he provided lessons or quizzes or something in advance of his standard lecture. And I think that's probably the best way to, it's a lot of work to prepare the material, but it gives the students, in effect, that asynchronous is a way to introduce the material. And then during the formal, call it lecture or synchronous lecture, whatever, it's a time to review the material and answer any questions, which is kind of what you've been describing here. So I think maybe that sort of like a long range, call it long range plan, but sort of an idea of what I'd like to go towards, something like that. But certainly the synchronous portion should be interactive in the sense, like I usually use the Socratic method, a series of questions in class. And it seems to me that the synchronous has to be like that, a bit like improv with theater, in which you don't know quite which direction it's going to go in. Whereas synchronous is more like, say, cinema, where there's a pre-plan of what's, so I don't know. As I said, this is a work in progress, and like we're all kind of struggling to figure out how to do this.
Yeah. All right, any final thoughts?
I want to thank you all, Ahmad, Sarah, Mark, and Andrea, who had to leave. I think just the topic, there's no end to this, and there's a lot of, but we heard a lot of different angles and aspect and criteria to make this choice. And thank you very much for sharing your experience with this.